It's casual, not formal. It's hosted by Rory, Penland, and Renée in tow. It's time to start the show. 1, 2, 3, go!
Okay, we are back. We were gone for a couple of weeks, doing a little vacation time, but we are back. And lovely Renée Yaworsky is here, as always.
We're back. I can't believe it.
Yeah.
It's Casual is back. It's like
Yeah.
it feels familiar, and yet it feels a little weird because I was thinking we were going to do the monster show. It's weird not to be, Major Millie from Yonkers or Call You Later, and she's got the lab coat on, but this is actually me. It says Renée down there.
But so you have a nice background.
Yes, of course. Not as good as the laboratory. I miss the laboratory.
Is that the Wuhan laboratory?
Yeah, no. Don't tell anyone about it, Rory.
No any secrets. Don't tell
I don't want anyone to know. It's all right.
It's another show. We don't have to worry about it. It's another show. So
sometimes we look like Sybil here. We forget who we are sometimes. Yeah.
We are so lucky because we have got a good friend who's come back for the third time now. He spent 17 years on the David Letterman show, coordinating talent for that show. He's been doing comedy since, the late 70s, early 80s. All the comics know him. He's comedian Eddie Brill. And let's go ahead and bring him on back. Bring him on up.
Hey, everybody. There we are.
It's Eddie Brill.
It's a sleepover.
Yeah, I know.
It is. I feel like being in bed right now. That's what I want to do. I feel like that.
Yeah. And I'm a little bit tired myself. First of all, I had to get teeth cleaning. And when they do that, it kind of knocks you out.
Yeah.
Then I had a meeting in between and I could have slept, but I'll make it. I'll be fine.
They didn't want to give you the laughing gas when you're doing the cleaning because they're picking.
Right. That would be weird. Yeah.
As fun as that might be.
Yes.
It's dangerous.
A little dangerous. Yeah. Let's see your teeth. Let's see the pearly whites. Let me see what. I'll inspect. Oh, they did a great job. Wow, look at that.
Yeah.
All right. It's very white. It's very Hollywood. There you go. See, you're telegenic. That's what it is.
See, I tried to use the purple toothpaste and it didn't work,
Yeah, didn't work.
The purple toothpaste?
The person who did it, Catherine, is very good at it. There's very little pain involved, which is really nice.
Catherine, you're on a first name basis with your tooth cleaning lady?
Are
you serious? Oh my gosh, this is why you were at Letterman, because you're so sociable. You're so sociable. Catherine, you know how many times I get my teeth cleaned? I don't, there's no talking, there's nothing. I mean, they're talking to me, but I'm just trying to get the hell out of Dodge.
Yeah, that's hard to talk when you
guys. Yeah.
Just that thing.
I'm just picturing Steve Martin the whole time.
Yeah, right. Oh, that's great. Feed me.
Yeah, feed me, Steve Martin. Yeah, we were talking about Eddie's shirt before we came on, and he said it before I even realized it, because I was feeling hungry for meatballs and spaghetti, and he goes, "Yeah, it looks like it, but it's like the perfect thing." And there was a whole Curb Your Enthusiasm about
roll a meatball
this.
over to your nose with my nose.
There was a Curb Your Enthusiasm thing where Larry was a partner in a restaurant in LA, and he wanted everyone to wear that as their uniform, and they said you can't do that. It looks like but he said that was the whole point.
Right.
For people who aren't fans of the show, that was a big diversion. I apologize. Rory, I'm sorry.
It's okay. I understand. So this particular show, well, here's what happened. When I was booking the show, when we're coming back, I was reading some of Eddie's stories that he put on Facebook. You're a really good writer.
Thank you.
I write and I aspire to be a good writer, and I've got a couple of novels out there now. And I'm continuing to write, and you really know how to weave a good story that entertains the audience, your readers, and you've written some wonderful tributes to a lot of people in the entertainment, not just comedians, but a lot of people in entertainment.
A lot of
Period.
people, who passed. I mean, it's so funny. You think, oh my God, how are we in this sort of weird time where so many people are passing? But people pass every 8 seconds, I think, or something like that. In the world, it's just if you know a lot of people pass away on you. So,
Right.
but it's it's sad. I
We
mean,
have lost a particularly large number of comedians this last two
yeah.
2.5 years, though.
Oh my God, yeah.
A
And just
lot
the
of
other
great
night,
comedians.
the other night, Geechee guy who
Meet you guy.
thinking about recently, and you just want to. So it's interesting because I'm trying to get together with a lot of my friends and calling them and hanging out because you never know, And I
Yeah.
thought, what I was thinking of, it's so creepy sadness, is that maybe if I pass away, they're gonna
Uh,
come in my room and find my room. So a lot of times I've been going to bed like straightening up before I like go to bed. So and then I realized, I should go the other way. I should do something crazy like put like a
Yeah,
blow up doll in bed with
leave
me,
clues.
and then like a petroleum jelly and like
jeez.
masking tape and tape the doll to me, and then when my friends find me in the morning, they go, "Oh my God, we didn't know this about Eddie," or
I feel
something.
like it's a lost opportunity if you don't. It would be your last act. It would be your last
Right?
performance, your last
Because
make it comedic, make it funny.
how they stage apartments or houses to
Yeah.
sell,
Your
and
stage
they
it
get
for
rid
your
of your
death scene.
you get this, you get rid of your stuff, and they put real good stuff in. So that's what I would do. I would stage my death. I would like,
You know
I
what you
think
should
David
do?
Carradine did that, didn't he? Oh,
yeah. Well, that's a different
Anybody you
thing.
don't like, Eddie, leave just put a note, so and so did it, and just leave that there for the cops
Did
and
what?
throw them off. At least the person will have to go to the police station at the very least, just inconvenience their day.
It'd be worth every
It would be
moment.
so fucking worth it. I think you should do it. I wanted to ask you, speaking about this, I wanted to ask if you had any Paul Rubens stories, because I love Paul Rubens. You've
It's
had to have
interesting.
crossed paths with him.
Because I know a lot of people, and when Paul passed away, a lot of people had asked me for my Paul Rubens story, and I don't have one. I met him
What?
when he was a guest on Letterman. I mean, I have so
yeah.
many
Mhm.
friends are friends with him, and I met him for probably 15 seconds, and
Mm.
so much respect for him. I mean, loved his show. I saw his Broadway show as live show a few times, and it's just he was so amazing, and and all my friends who knew him really well said he was just this amazing person. But he always made me laugh, and I loved his work. But I don't really have any stories except that I love his work.
All
My
right. Well,
my
that's great.
favorite clip of him still today is the one they did with Carl Reiner, where he was just starting to do the Pee Wee character as a stand-up.
Mm.
And it's so funny and so charming. And again, later he kind of got edgy, and he's like,
Right.
what am I? He started with all of
Right.
that.
Mhm.
Well, when he
but
was on Letterman, when I
he
went
was
in
so
the
innocent
NBC
back
days.
then.
Mhm.
Yeah, in the NBC days before I worked there, I didn't work at Letterman until CBS days, but the NBC days when he would come on for Halloween and dress funny and bring funny props and stuff. I mean, I couldn't get enough. And you could see how much fun Dave was having because there's a lot of these
Yeah.
clips
Mhm.
are out. It's just so funny. Just
He loved deadpanning him when he was doing all
yeah,
crazy stuff. They would do a shot of David. He was like, okay.
yeah, it was great.
Yeah, I didn't put him on my list. I mean, we talked about your relationship with Dick Cavett. And I can't remember if you told us the story of how you guys met.
Yeah, the Great American Comedy Festival started in 2008, and the very first year, the recipient of the Johnny Carson Award was Dick, because he knew Johnny, he wrote for Johnny, he did magic like Johnny did, and they're both from Nebraska, and they have a great friendship, great relationship, and so the very first year we made him the recipient of the Johnny Carson Award, and we met, and I was a little nervous because I really respect him,
Yeah.
and we just became like 5 seconds into we were best friends, and it just
Oh man.
and it was very surreal and fantastic. And I just saw him a couple of weeks ago. His stepson got married, and we went out to the wedding. It was really great. It was a really fun day, and they have a beautiful house, and and he makes me laugh, and it's so
So
cool that when I
intelligent.
make him
Great
laugh,
guy.
when you make someone you really respect laugh, it just is even bigger and stronger.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. The one that I read this past week was Robert Schimmel, Bob Schimmel.
Yeah, he was one of my favorite comedians just in the world, and I was pretty much living at the Comedy Store in LA, and this I was flirting with this young lady, and she and I were getting along, and all of a sudden they announced, because the original room is one of the three rooms at the Comedy Store. Yeah, that was us in Las Vegas, hanging out with my hero George Carlin. And I don't know where I got that haircut and that jacket, but that's a whole other show. And so we're the original room. There's sort of like there's a little doorway that you can hang in and watch the comedians and not bother the audience of the show. So I'm standing there, and all of a sudden they announced Robert, and the woman who I was flirting with, I said, "You know what? I just want to watch this guy. He's my favorite." And she goes, "That's my brother." And I said,
Uh,
"Oh my God." So I said, "Can you introduce me?" And so I met Robert that night, and we became friends right away. And then a week later, I happened to be working in Boston at this comedy club, Nick's, great comedy club. And it was down the street from another great comedy club, the Comedy Connection. So I was working in Nick's, and Robert was working at the Comedy Connection. And we met up there in Boston. We realized we both had Hungarian roots, and he took me to a Hungarian restaurant and asked me if I would travel with him as a comedian, and we became like brothers. He was I'm the oldest of five, and I never had an older brother or older sister. My father and mother were more like, because they were very young, they were like older brother and sister, but Robert became my older brother, and we started travel all over together and laughed, and were creative, and it was really beautiful. And he not only did he take very good care of me work wise, he also gave me his apartment to live in when I was in LA. It was just, couldn't ask for a more incredibly beautiful friend. And he was one of the funniest human beings ever. I remember, Albert Brooks was a huge fan, and all the greatest comics in the world love, loved him so much. And so he was respected by a lot of people. It was great.
he was a brilliant comic. Yeah.
Oh my
Just,
God.
oh man. People used to get down on him for being, dirty. He worked in blue,
Yeah.
but God, he was just so brilliant. Some of the stuff that he came up with.
Yeah, no, he was, but there's a difference between dirty, like, first of all, there's dirty and naughty are two different words. And dirty,
Yeah.
I don't think of a comic as dirty. I mean, I think of a comic as, I think of people as naughty and nice, and the combination, not one or the other, but most human beings, I'd say every human being has a naughty side and a nice side. It matters how much you're willing to open up and be who you are. And the reason why Schimmel really hit home to so many people is because we've been told our whole lives never to be naughty, which goes against humanity, goes against, human nature. And that's why people laugh so hard at Schimmel, because he was able to say all the things that everyone was thinking.
Right. The bit that comes to my mind was that he was talking about a cream that made your penis bigger.
Oh, right.
And he goes, well, wait a minute. Well, if you're rubbing, you're with the cream, wouldn't your hand get huge?
Yeah, that's right. Exactly.
You'd be walking around with a big, huge hand. Everybody looking at you.
You rub anything on your dick, it gets bigger. It doesn't matter. My favorite joke of his, he says, turns out you can teach your cat how to use the bathroom. So he says, great. Now the cat's in there, and you got to go, and the cat's in there. He knocks on the door. He says, I got to go. Let me in. So he says, screw it. I'll use the box. So then he says, my friends come over and they go, what do you have, a mountain lion for a pet? And then he said, So I noticed it was black, and I put it in a plastic bag and brought it to the hospital. And I said, "Is there something wrong with this?" And the guy said, "You carrying your shit around in a bag?" Yes. So then I called my father. I go, "Dad, you're not going to believe this, but I took a shit and it was black." And father says, "You're not going to believe this. I'm in a business meeting and you're on the speakerphone." That's pretty much word for word the bit. But I would travel with him, and he just made me laugh, and
Yeah.
it was nice because he respected my comedy and wanted, it was just so nice to have one of the greatest comics in the world like your stuff too. But we were brothers and we hung out. We had a lot of fun. We loved movies and loved music, and it was just a great friendship, and I miss him all the time.
Yeah. Another recent one that you wrote about was Taylor Negron.
Yeah, he was very good to me as well. And I say I was very lucky because these people were so giving. There's such a pay it forward in comedy. And a lot of people complain about comedy or anything. People complain about, the air, anything. People looking to complain about things. But, comedy, one of the great things about comedy is how everyone looks out for each other, or most people look out for each other. And
Right.
I mean,
Sometimes it can be a cutthroat business, if you're on the
oh,
road.
every business is a cutthroat business
Yeah.
because there's always assholes, and what are you going to do?
Yeah.
I mean, Dick Cavett tells stories about Joan Rivers and how every time he had a new show, she was a big star and she would show up just to help him get, big audiences the first nights. Everyone looked out for each other. With Taylor, he was just such a marvel to watch on stage because he played and he ad-libbed and he went with moments, and I've always dreamt about that because I remember working with Paula Poundstone a million years ago in San Francisco, the other cafe, and it was just, it was like going to school for comedy, and she was so good working the crowds and having fun with them and turning maybe a sour crowd member into her best friend. But Taylor was really great at ad-libbing and playing, and I went up to him and I said, I asked him a million questions, and him and I became very, very close. And and then he would watch me and give me some notes and all this kind of stuff, and it was great. And then eventually he was in New York and we hung out. He would make me these grandiose lunches in his backyard, and we would hang out and then go over by the river and look at the water, and we would walk down the street. We'd sing together. We'd make up words to songs, and it was like having a little, like a cousin who was hilarious. And again, he treated me really, really well. He was so generous with everyone, and I was lucky to be one of them.
He seemed like he might have a spiritual side, like you
Yeah.
said, going down to the river and watching the river and stuff. I don't know what gave me that feeling about him, but when I watched him perform, when I've seen him in movies and stuff, it just
Yeah, and
it
then
seemed like he
like
might be that
I
kind of
remember
person.
one day we were walking down the street, and every time we pass a shop, they'd all know him. They'd all run out front, like it was just so nice. Everyone, he was so loved by so many people, and it was inspirational. It was great.
I saw that you did a gig in Paris, thanks to Rich Hall of all
Yeah,
people. Rich
yeah.
Hall, Highway 6. Uh,
I just spoke to him the other day. I'm working on a project and I love him to be part of it. And he said, yes. Rich Hall was again, I was at Caroline's one night. Rich happened to be there, Caroline's Comedy Club in New York. And
right.
Rich was there. We were working together, and I was so nervous, not nervous. I was just like, I wanted to do well with him there. And he came up to me after the show and said, hey, let's go have dinner, and started our friendship. And not only did, he, like, we'd go to the Edinburgh Comedy Festival, and I couldn't be there the full 30 days because I was working at Letterman, but he would be there and he'd get me on shows and be seen by the biggest people in the industry doing that. And he recommended a bunch of gigs for me. And, he had a sort of an apartment in London, and he let me stay there when I would visit London. It's just, again, another great person, hilarious person, and still to this day, one of the most prolific comics that's out there.
Yeah, I remember he was doing Sniglets, and he was doing not necessarily news, and then he ended up on Fridays,
Right.
with Larry David and Michael Richards, and
Yes. And he worked at Letterman. He worked on the morning show, Letterman's first morning show. He did
oh
that.
wow.
Yeah. Hey, Sandy D. Yay.
And then he got Saturday Night Live. He was one of the only people to ever be. Him and Melanie Chardoff are the only two
Right.
people I think that were ever on Fridays and Saturday Night Live.
Yeah. Well,
And
if there was a Sunday show, I think they would both be on that as well. But he called me up and he said, "There's a gig in Paris. It's the best gig in the world," and it was. And
wow.
the guy named Carol Beer, who was the head of it, and the reason why it was so good is because Carol had good taste and knew how to create an atmosphere that was great. So Rich, got me the gig. This guy Carol took Rich's word for it. So I went out to Paris with my girlfriend at the time, and we were there and we were looking for him. We never met him. He never met me. I saw him and we finally hooked up, and he said, "All right, the show tonight, you do 45 minutes, and then we take a break, and then you do your second 45. And I go, "Oh, two different crowds?" He goes, "No, same crowd." So I'm thinking an hour and a half, it's a lot of time, especially in another country. I don't know, how it would work in this other culture and all this stuff. So,
So yeah, two different 45-minute sets.
Right. So I ran to the phone. And I said, "Rich, what did you get me into?" He says, "Eddie, this is the best comedy club in the world." He said, "It's like a jazz club for comedians. Just ad lib and play with them the first 45 minutes, take the break, and then, do like your act in the second half or whatever." So my girlfriend's like, "Let's go to the Louvre." I go, "Look, you go to the Louvre. I have to write an act." And I had quit smoking 7 months, and now I started smoking. I was so nervous. How am I going to fill the time? So I go out and I go on stage because I'm the only performer on the whole show. This guy Carol I mentioned, he would come up on stage and tell everyone what was coming up. He not only had booked comedians, but he booked musicians in this incredible space, always sold out. So he said to me, he goes up on stage, does a little thing. So I come out and I start working the crowd. And, I was good at it and not, Paula Poundstone good, but was pretty good at it. And so I'm working the crowd, and I'm having the time of my life. This really is the best comedy club in the world. And all of a sudden, I look at my watch to see if I've done 45 yet. I felt like I was around 30. And I look at my watch, I had done an hour and 5 minutes.
Oh,
It's like, oh my God. I go, "Folks, we'll be right back after this break." So I take the break. Everyone gets more drinks and everything. And then I came back and I did another hour. And then I said good night. And then they asked for an encore, which is weird. In Europe, they ask for encores a lot. You have to really suck not to get an encore because the audience loves that whole kind of thing. And they asked for more, and I don't have any more. I'm just, And so I ended up telling some true stories in my life, and made them, funny by just telling it in the way. And then they wanted another encore, and then I'm like, now I'm telling street jokes because I've run out of things. I'm reading out of the dictionary. It was pretty amazing. It was really good. And then I did, like the first time I was there was like 3 nights in a row, and I'm doing 2 hours every night, and I don't have 2 hours. So at the end of the week, I was sitting with this guy, Carol, and he said, "That was such a fun time. Thanks for coming. We'll have you back every year." And we started doing an American in Paris. So every July 4th week, I would come out to Paris to do the gigs. And I said, "It's such a shame because I ad-libbed my ass off. I wish I had this recorded." He says, "Oh, I recorded all the shows for you." And then he gave me the CDs or whatever. And I was able to come up with newer material because of the ad-libs I did. Awesome. And Rich did that all the time for me. The Edinburgh Festival, he got me stage time, like I had said a little bit earlier. Every time there was something going on big, and he got me involved. And again, I'm not the only person he did this for. This guy Mike Wilmot from Canada, he was good. What's his face? Tom Rhodes. We were sort of these comics.
That's what I was going to say. He fell off the radar for a while. I didn't see Rich Hall for the longest
because
time.
He's been in Europe the whole time. He moved to London.
And I'm watching one of Tom Rhodes's videos. I think he was in Bangkok, Thailand. He was one of the Asian tour. And at the end of the video, in the end credits, Rich Hall is one of the tech people that's working on the show.
Yeah,
he's probably the director. I didn't even look at the credits to see if he was directing it.
He might have just done that even as a joke, but Rich, Rich was really generous. And again, he let me have his place. Oftentimes, like if he's away, he'll still let me use his place. It was great, He's a very generous man. He became a huge star in England, huge, selling out theaters, shows. The minute his tickets would go on sale, they were gone. And then he created another character called Otis Lee Crenshaw, and he played music and original songs, and it was really fun. So he would tour twice, two different shows. One is Rich Hall, one is Otis Lee Crenshaw, and he just never was at a loss for work. And still to
Wow.
this day, he's one of the most popular comics in all of Europe, even though he's an American comic.
Yeah. Wow. Interesting. That's why he's falling off the radar here. He's doing
Yeah,
it over there.
over there. But he's back in Montana now, and he's been working locally there a little bit. Always had a house in Montana.
Oh,
And so, yeah, I spoke to him. I'm working on a project. And like I said, I asked him if he would be involved, and he said yes. So it's good.
Stephen Wright.
We went to college together. We met right away. We became friends. We made each other laugh. There's nobody in the world I laugh with more. Nobody in person, not on stage or whatever, than Stephen and I. We cry laughing. It is such. We both do. We laugh. I mean, it's so healthy and so great. But I mean, I talked to him a couple of days ago, crying, laughing, crying, out of breath. You can't breathe laughing. And we both do that every time. We've almost gotten kicked out of places because we laugh too much. And it was like people were yelling at us, calm down, calm down. There's other
Making
people
too much
around.
noise.
Yeah, too much fun. Stop
Too
laughing.
much raucous laughter over there.
So he was, one of the first of our friends who really started doing well. And, he's just such a great guy. Started out in Boston when we all went to Emerson College together. Me, Dennis Leary, Stephen Wright, Mario Cantone. Before us, it was Leno and Andrea Martin and Bill Dana. And after us, it was Bill Burr and David Cross and Jen Kirkman and Jennifer Connelly. Jennifer Coolidge. I'm sorry, not Jennifer Connelly. And so all these people had gone to Emerson together. It was at separate points. We all looked out for each other and created this scenario up there. So Stephen was one of the first ones, and we got all inspired by his comedy and his success. And then a lot of us started doing it.
You mentioned that George Carlin is a hero, as he's a hero of many young comics that went on to do stand up. I remember wearing the hell out of an album. Was it Class Clown?
Yeah, that was one of them.
The one,
That's
yeah,
the name.
Class Clown, because he's sitting on a stool in front of a chalkboard.
Chalkboard, right?
On that, and it's the 7 bad words you can't say on television is on there.
Right. And now there's all more and to that bit. But he had, I had seen the Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. He had an album, FM and AM. And then I also saw him on the Flip Wilson show. Now, a lot of people might not have heard of Flip Wilson, but he was a genius, not only comedian, but an incredible producer. Yeah, an incredible producer, and also produced Carlin's records,
Yeah.
And there was a great skit from my childhood on Flip Wilson with Joe Namath, who was one of my heroes, George Carlin, and Flip Wilson. And I've got to work at the Apollo a couple of times, and there's a Flip Wilson room in the backstage. So if you ever get a chance to rent the DVD of Flip Wilson shows, some of the funniest shows in the world with some of the most amazing.
Yeah, you can see a lot of stuff on YouTube.
You have
from the Flip Wilson show, and from his guest appearances, like on right here, live in our show.
At Sullivan. But yeah, Flip Wilson had. I mean, the very first. There's a show where Red Fox is a guest on the Flip Wilson show, and it's probably one of the funniest moments ever. It's where Flip is a stand-up comedian and Red is somebody in the audience and just heckling him, and it's really brilliantly funny. And what's interesting is I found out that show was done, and 2 days later it was the start of the Flip Wilson Sanford and Son show. So Flip Wilson, Red Fox was on Flip Wilson plugging his brand new show.
Right.
Lucille Ball was a guest on the Flip Wilson show, Bob Hope. It's just and it's whatever you think or say about Cosby, and there's a lot to think and say. His appearance on the Flip Wilson show was great too.
Yes. Well, Cosby was a brilliant comedian.
Right.
I mean, it's a shame that he ended up where he ended up, but he was
Yeah.
a brilliant comedian back in the 60s and the 70s. There's no way around that.
Yeah, I remember
Um,
seeing him at Radio City Music Hall in New York. It's the 6,200 seat theater, and I was up in one of the mezzanines, but I was crying, laughing. It was 2.5 hours of straight laughing. It was amazing.
yeah. Another album from my childhood, Wonderfulness.
Yes.
I actually had several of his albums. Why Is There Air? Bill Cosby is a very funny fellow, right? That was, I think,
Yeah.
that was his first one, I think.
Did you
And
buy the albums, or did your parents have them, or?
you know, I think I bought them. I'm pretty sure I bought them, like at a
Because
used
my
record
parents,
store.
it was great. My parents had all these albums, Bob Newhart and Bill Cosby and Shelley Berman and the Smothers Brothers and Flip Wilson and Red Fox and Richard Pryor. So we had all this stuff at our house. And then the first comedy album I bought was that Carlin FM and AM album.
Mm-hmm.
I bought it with my own dollar that I had saved up.
Yeah, I think my sister, who kind of raised me when I was young,
Right.
she got a couple of albums. She might have gotten the Carlin album actually, and she got a couple of Cheech and Chong albums.
Nice.
Big
My
Bang
mom
Boom,
loved Cheech and Chong.
the wedding album.
Oh God.
And again, I can't remember for the life of me where I got the Bill Cosby albums from. I think I bought them, or I bought
At the
one first,
drugstore.
and I really liked it, and I went back and probably got more because I had like 5 or 6 of them.
Yeah.
You had an interesting story about how you met Dame Edna.
Yeah,
we just lost Barry Humphries
Yes.
not long ago, and you told the story of how
I
you met.
wouldn't say it was much of a story, but the interesting thing was, I was working at Catch a Rising Star in Las Vegas at the MGM Grand, and it was a really good room, a fun room. It was next to the poker tables, which was fun for me too.
Mm-hmm.
But after one of the shows, this married couple, came up to me from Australia, and they told me they enjoyed the show. Could they buy me a drink? Yes. We sat at the bar. We talked about comedy, and they were living in England, and we were talking about the difference between British and American comedy and the crowds. And then he gave me his card at the end and said, if you're ever in London, when you're in London again, call me. And it was Barry Humphries. And I was like, all of a sudden I realized, oh my God, I've been talking to Dame Edna this whole time, but he never let on. He
Did
never
it hit
said,
you right away when you saw the name Barry Humphries, or?
It took a second. I went, oh my God, and, but he was he was very genuine, and he'd come to New York to do his Broadway show, and he'd let me, I'd come up there after the show and hang out with him. And, it's funny to see him taking off his costume. He's like half Edna and half Barry at certain points.
And obviously, it looks nothing like Dame Edna when he gets the stuff off.
Oh, yeah.
That was the amazing thing about Phyllis Diller. When I worked with Phyllis Diller, she would walk out with the crowd after the show was over because she would take all the stuff off and she just looked like a normal person.
That's
when
great.
she got all the wigs and the feathers and everything off. It was really funny. And I knew what I was looking for, but nobody else would recognize her when she would walk out with the rest of the crowd. It was so funny.
Yeah, I loved her.
Wanda Sykes.
Yeah, I knew her. We done a lot of comedy shows for Alan King. Had a scenario called the Laugh Well program, where he would bring comics to hospitals and to perform for patients and to make them laugh and feel better. And supposedly it worked in a lot of ways. And I remember one of the first shows, me, Wanda, and Greg Giraldo worked together. We worked together in Brooklyn at the hospital I was born in, Maimonides Hospital. And I told the crowd, I said, look, this is my first performance here. I was born here. So if I don't do well, I can say I was born here and I died here. You never
get any respect in your hometown.
No. And I worked a lot with Wanda. She was great. She was terrific. And one of the best comics ever. She hit it out of the park early, and
very funny. Very funny lady. Gilbert Gottfried.
Yeah, he lived in the East Village where I lived, and I'd see him all the time. And there's his incredible family.
There he
And
is
so,
on the right.
yes, and the woman next to me is Denise Reese, Mike Reese of who wrote for Johnny Carson and wrote for The Simpsons, one of the main guys. And Denise is amazing. The Mike and Denise are an amazing couple, and they're really close with. We were all doing this festival in Woodstock that I had helped to put on, and that was. Where Mike and Denise they were doing a Simpsons thing. Gilbert, of course, was headlining the big show, where we raised money for the women's shelter there. And, it was just great to, it's one of the great things about comedy festivals, because as a comedian, you work a weekend and you don't usually work the whole weekend with your friends or whatever. But at a festival, you get to work with a big group of different people. And oftentimes you get to see a lot of your friends at once. And that was one of those weekends where we knew everyone and we had a lot of fun doing that.
Louis C.K.
Yeah, I remember in Boston when he was a young comic. I think I hosted the very first show he did or whatever, and he was very, very funny and just a great comic and very inventive and silly. And he was working at the Dana Carvey show when I were in New York, and I was working the Dana Carvey show as the warm up. And then the show got canceled because it was too smart for American television.
They
And
only did like 7 shows, right? 7 or 8
something
shows.
like that. Yeah, just a few.
And that's where Steve Carroll and Colbert got their start
everybody.
on that one. Yeah.
And Robert Smigel was the director, and
Yeah.
Louis C.K. was one of the producers. And so when the show broke up, they all went to other cool places to work. And Louis worked at Letterman, and Letterman had asked if they knew anyone who could do warm up, because they were looking for a new warm up comic, and Louis recommended me. So and I got a 6-week trial period that lasted 17 years.
Wow. There you go.
I wanted to say that, Dave, I wanted to say real quick that I just saw yesterday, Dana Carvey posted a clip from that, and it was him and Steve, and it's them just standing there, and they're just doing German accents, but saying friendly things. That's the whole sketch. Yeah. So it's them yelling in German accents, like, I would like some ice cream. I would, like you're such a great person. Like, it's just like 3 minutes of that, and I just thought it was brilliant. So it's funny that you just mentioned
so
that.
funny.
That
so
is
clever.
Definitely a Steve Carroll bit.
Yeah, it was written by Steve. Yeah, it was written by Steve. But I just thought that's brilliant, but it was way above people's heads at the time, I think.
Right, and it was filmed at the CBS studios in New York City, even though it wasn't a CBS show. I don't think it was a CBS show. Forgot already.
Wow. I remember they had trouble keeping sponsors.
Right.
They did a great takeoff on the Beatles anthology album.
Right.
And I remember Carol and Dana Carvey going through drive-thrus and like punking the people in the drive-thru, but they would pay them money and then they would drive off.
Right. That's right.
Leave the money. Stuff like
Good.
that.
And then, of course, Robert Smigel, another genius. He was a main guy on that show.
Yeah, he did another show. If they don't know who Bob Smigel is, he did a lot of the Saturday Night Live cartoon TV Funhouse, and he's also Triumph the Insult Dog,
right?
Which he's again another brilliant character.
He was also the
he did a show TV Funhouse himself that lasted a season, and it was hysterical, but it was pushing the edge. It was naughty, as you said.
Yeah. He do a really cool thing every year, and like a night of 1,000 comedians or something like that, and it was at the Beacon Theater and raising money for autism, and it was pretty great. And I got to warm up the crowd to the Beacon, which is such an incredible venue. Thanks to Bob Smigel.
There you go. Don Rickles.
Oh, God. My father's favorite comedian was Don Rickles. A mixture. My father also, like Buddy Hackett and a few other people like that. But his idol was Rickles. And Rickles was at Letterman, and I wanted to meet him. And we weren't really allowed to go into people's dressing rooms unless we knew them. But I snuck up to Rickles, and I knocked on the door, gingerly knocking, going, "Excuse me, I'm a comedian." He says, "Get in here." And he pulled me into the green room, his dressing room. and he had his the two guys who always worked with him all the time, and we just sat and we had a long chat about. I had just come back from Hong Kong working. It was before 9/11. It was we were talking about all different things, and one of them was what's it like working in other countries, and we just hit it off really well. And then on one of the shows, my father wasn't that into me being a comedian at the beginning. He wanted me to be in his electronics wholesale business, and he wasn't happy that I was comedian. Eventually, he became one of my biggest fans, and
Mm.
but one of the things that put him over the top was there was an episode of Letterman where Rickles was a guest, and Rickles was searching for a name, and I knew who he was talking about, and I yelled out Tommy Lee Jones, and Rickles says, "Shut up, you hockey puck! I knew it all along," or something like that. And Letterman said, "Why are you yelling at Eddie? He helped you get the answer." And he says, "Oh, I'm just kidding. I love Eddie," and said all these wonderful things. I know about this in his career and this in his career, and he's now the booker here and all this. And my father was like, that really solidified. My father was like, "Oh
That
my
was
God."
it.
It made him, like my stepmother said, yeah, he was like crying and joy. And, so
Wow.
Rickles and I would talk all the time when he'd come in, and he just
Mhm.
so sweet, so nice. What a big heart. And then the very last time he was on the show, he could hardly walk. And,
Oh.
but a lot of times I mean, he could walk, but it just,
Uh-huh.
gingerly as getting older. And,
Right.
so what we would do with some guests, we put them in the chair already before when we come out of the commercial break, so they didn't have to walk across and
Right.
the
Right.
stage. So Rickles was in the seat, and he does the segment, and we kind of all know that's probably his last appearance on the show because he was getting up there, and it was a heavy heart, and that kind of thing. But at the end of that. Rickles thing, he finished the segment, and now he has to get off the stage, and he reached out for my hand, and I helped him climb off the stage. And it was like that same hand he reached out for me when I first ever knocked on his dressing room door. you know yeah, Noel said that Rickles followed hardcore insults by being the sweetest, most endearing, and making those comments. And what's interesting is people say, how does a guy who's just, shitting on everyone doing that and getting loved? Is because the foundation of Don Rickles was love and warmth,
Right.
and let's,
Right.
Mr. Warmth, and let's all realize that we're all idiots and we're all human.
Everybody knew it was just an act. Yeah.
Right.
And he was really good at it. I mean,
Yeah.
he improved so much.
Ugh.
And he was just really good at it. He was just very quick, right up
Yeah.
to the end.
Yeah.
I remember seeing a thing just before he passed with Billy Crystal. They were doing a thing in a restaurant, and
Mm.
he was just sharp as a tack.
Sharp
God.
as a tack. So funny. So smart. Yeah. And I think, what happens is he, was doing like 3 to 5 shows a day in Vegas, and you just can't help but getting great at it. One of the things about comedians, and there are a few other professions like this, the more you do it, the better you're at. And the older you
Yeah.
get, the more savvy you are at it. I mean, the only way to get better in comedy is stage time. You can't
Right.
teach it. You're either funny or you're not. And a lot of times, there are people in the industry who are not savvy enough to know that, Joan Rivers was great. And, in the older she got, or, you mentioned Phyllis Diller or George Burns or, Milton Berle, or all these people in their 90s doing comedy and being great at it because, so today, I mean, it's always good to find young talent and to push young talent and get them, but to push the old people away is a crime, because these are the people who
Yeah.
not only are hilarious, but are getting better and better at it, because that's the one thing about comedy. The more you do it, the better you're. A lot of jobs, like if you're a baseball player, the more you do it, the better you are. But you get to a certain age where you can't hit 300 all the time. But in comedy, you hit 300 most of your career, and all of a sudden you're 10 years later, you're hitting 340, and then all of a sudden you're hitting 400. And, comedy is like that. So
Yeah.
if, the
Sure.
ageist people, I'm older, I'm 64, and there are situations where people are looking at like, well, he's 64 and he's an old white guy, and, we got enough of that and all this kind of stuff. And it's like, well, I've never been better. It's just the way it goes by working all the time. And, and putting the work in and loving it as much as I do.
There you go. Speaking of which, there's a guy that responds a lot, or actually, there's two that respond a lot to a lot of your posts on Facebook. Rich Scheidner is one of them,
Oh,
and
I
Blake
didn't.
and Blake Clark.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
I like, yeah, they're both great comics. I mean, Blake and I know each other from the Comedy Store days, and I met Rich Scheidner later on, and I was in his movie. I actually filmed like a few days with him, and I got in for like 30 seconds. But
Yeah,
that's how
that's how it goes.
That's how it goes. But he's a very talented guy, very great storyteller, incredible storyteller, and Blake is just a flat out amazing human being, and he was
Yeah.
another one of the guys who was good to me in the early days of the Comedy Store for me in the 80s.
Very good, awesome. Let's change gears just a tad here. You evidently like Elvis Costello.
Oh yeah, big time.
You've gone to concerts, and of course here it's obvious you guys have met and hung out probably a little bit.
We're talking about different throat lozenges right there, and in that photo. That was
which ones that he uses when he does a concert?
No, actually, I had I forget. Honestly, I forgot who brought it up. But we were talking about throat issues, and one of us had lozenges, and we just brought it out and took a photo. That was in the basement of the Ed Sullivan Theater, and he was with his band down there, and I've had a lot of experiences with Elvis and his band, and it's kind of cool. Like, one of the weird things is, you get to meet your heroes, and luckily a lot of them were fantastic, and Elvis was brilliant. And, there was a time when Letterman was out because he had shingles, so they had special guest hosts.
Oh, wow.
And Elvis was one of the guests on that week, and I got to work with him at the desk and talking to him in every commercial break and making sure he was okay, and asking if he needed anything, and it was and just being a support system, and it was amazing for me.
Now, you were hosting the show?
No, Elvis was.
Oh, Elvis was hosting the show,
right?
Okay.
And I was booking. We had a comic every night. I had to book a comic every night that Letterman was out. So I remember that night we had Eddie Izzard was a guest.
Izzard.
Yeah, and I booked Mitch Hedberg because I thought Hedberg and Costello was a nice combination.
That is brilliant. Yes, yeah. I could definitely see Mitch Hedberg getting into some Elvis Costello.
Yes. Yeah.
Richard Belzer.
Just first of all, nicest guy in the world. Very very talk about an ad lib or someone who just off the cuff, always being funny, always great, but a great guy. Just a terrific, amazing guy. And I remember being in LA, and he's just so down to earth. He was so famous, but you never thought of him as famous because he was just one of the guys, and it was great to see. And Noel says, I hope I'm pronouncing it right, comedians and musicians seem to have an amazing different ways of processing pain in life. It actually helps people in different ways. Yes, laughter is the best medicine. And it was, and everyone has pain, and everyone has, whether it be you stub your toe or you break your foot, that's one is more intense than the other, but it's still painful for you. So, with comedy, you get to, it's not only about pain. It's also about joy and sarcasm and having fun and being playful. And, especially like what I learned from Carlin is just having fun with the language. But when you have, like, I've had some incredibly horrific scenarios, and I had to go on stage, and luckily that really, made everything better. For a moment, I remember I was doing a show with Schimmel and Patrice O'Neill and Dennis Leary for the very first New York Comedy Festival. And I had just heard that my brother, it was a misdiagnosis, but I was told that he had pancreatic cancer. No, yeah, pancreatic cancer, which I knew from Bill Hicks dying, that it was something that took you away right away. So I was freaking out. I had all these shows I had to do. I had warm up Letterman, had an interview with ABC TV, had a show at Caroline's that night, and then I had a show at Carnegie Hall with all those guys. I just kept it together all the way through, knowing that my brother would probably be dead soon. and then did the show, had one of the best shows of my life because I used all that energy, and then collapsed backstage. Luckily, I found out it was just pancreatitis. It was something it was a misdiagnosis by the doctors. But there was a moment in time where I was just running on fumes, and comedy did that for me. Comedy kept me alive for a few hours.
So did you sue him for punitive damages?
No, I wish. They weren't. They were very puny.
Do you realize what you put us through?
Yeah,
Man, I can't believe that. Wow.
No.
I'm running on a list here.
What's that?
David Steinberg. I'm
Oh,
running
my
on a list
God.
here.
Well, Steinberg, he was, Canadian and Winnipeg, and he was on the Smothers Brothers show, which was one of the most brilliant television shows of all time, with some of the greatest writers, including Rob Reiner and Steve Martin, and tons of people writing, brilliant writers. And Steinberg took a lot of chances and did a lot of sort of religious material. And in that era, there's a lot of people, and still to this day, people don't know, never are so afraid to question religion or question anything,
Right.
that they get uptight when you do that, but they end up laughing the most because it's so necessary to question. I mean, that's what Carlin taught all of us. It's question everything.
Yeah.
And, Steinberg questioned the sort of the bullshit, that the game that religion often plays in many cases. And they wanted him off the air. And in fact, Richard Nixon was really angry. And there was, they kept Steinberg out of a lot of things. But the interesting thing about Steinberg is he hosted the Tonight Show with Johnny Carson, I think, more than anyone else guest hosted and all that. He was just a brilliant man. And I was lucky enough to get to know him, and I worked on his show a little bit, Stand Up, Stand Up, or Stand Up, Stand Out, or something like that. And we became close. And then I was running the comedy festival in Nebraska honoring Johnny Carson, and brought Steinberg out there. And that was that photo you showed of me interviewing Steinberg at Johnny's desk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wanted to back up for a second because you mentioned Bill Hicks, who again, he's one of those guys that I had the chance to work with him, and I blew it.
In what way?
I had a chance to open for him at the Comedy Corner down in South, West Palm Beach.
West Palm Beach, yeah.
And they said, the guy that we're bringing in, Bill Hicks, he kind of goes off on audiences. He's kind of a loose cannon. And I was like, oh, well, I don't want to work with that.
Oh, man.
Idiot move. And then 10 years later, I'm listening to some of his CDs, and I'm like, oh my God, this guy is brilliant. He is so damn funny.
And he went to England too. I got to go to England. Tom Rhodes, me, Rich Hall, a lot of us got to go in England, became better comics because of it. And Hicks, blew them away in Europe. And he was just amazing. And he taught me a lot of stuff. I remember he said to me, when we hang out together, you're smart and you're funny. And then you go on stage and you do this love me dance. He said, all I want, you just want approval and kind of thing. And he really took it to me, and I appreciated it, and I became a better comic because of my relationship with him.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. See, I blew it. I had the chance, and he was the one that got away. Man. That chokes me up. Just thinking about that.
I understand.
Again,
I've been choked up many
somebody
times.
that I really, really have high respect for now, and could have worked with him. Jack Carter. You told an interesting word about Jack Carter not too long ago.
Well, it's interesting. There's what's his face? Can't think of his name. He's Letterman friend from a million years ago, Tom Dreesen. He would always tell these old jokes, and one of his old jokes was, he said, this Hollywood ingenue came to LA and they interviewed and said, name 3 guys you'd really like to have sex with. And she said, well, Robert Redford, Paul Newman, and Jack Carter. And they were like, Jack Carter? She says, yeah, because everywhere I go in Hollywood, they say, fuck Jack Carter. I remember that. Well, Jack Carter's, had a bad reputation of being a hothead and whatever, but really funny, hilariously hilarious, funny
Yeah.
guy. And I got to do a show with him. There was a tribute to him and Norm Crosby, who's
Right.
one of my heroes and became a friend as well. And they were good friends. And so we did a Friars tribute to these guys, and I got to perform. And then I got to meet Jack Carter, and that was he was actually great to me. And then I worked with him years later in another show, and he was very old, but it was kind of endearing to watch him. I saw this old man sitting in a chair, and I didn't even realize it was Jack Carter because he looked old and like he was somebody's grandfather that they keeping him backstage so that he would be watched or something. And all of a sudden they start announcing him, and this guy comes to life up out of the chair, and and he just goes on stage and just kills it.
Did he have a
And
loud sport coat on?
yeah, I think so. But he was again.
Time to go.
Jack Carter turned out to be, whatever other people think about him, he couldn't have been nicer to me. Him and Norm,
There you go.
they were like, I didn't stay afterwards after we did that show for the Friars, and I was kind of bummed because I would have liked to had talked to them. And then the next night I went to a Broadway show, and in the intermission, everyone gets up to go out, and there was Norm and Jack coming up the aisle, and I went, "Hey, I don't know if you remember, I'm from." They go, "Oh, Jack, come here." I was to Norm. He said, "Here's that kid Brill." He said, "We were doing your act all day today, and we were doing that."
Kid Brill.
Yeah, and they said, "Kid," I was older. And they came up to me and they said, "Would you mind? Would you be okay to meet our wives?" And I was like, "Wait a second, I'm supposed to be asking you these questions." But they really liked my comedy, so I was pretty thrilled at that.
Now, Norm Crosby was the head of the Friars Club, or is it Pat Cooper I'm thinking of?
Pat Cooper might have been. I don't know who was the head of it. I know Norm because there's different people. They have an Abbott and they have Alan King.
Alan King was for a while, yeah.
Right. There was all these different people who were in charge.
Might have been both.
Yeah, might have been all of them.
Do you have any stories about Pat Cooper?
The show I was talking about with Jack Carter coming to life, that was a show of young and old people, and comics that were younger, comics were older, and me and Jeff Altman and a couple other people were the younger comics in those days. And those guys, Jack Carter, Norm Crosby, Pat Cooper, and I can't think of the other guy's name. So we did a show with all of them, and they were very nice. They loved. One thing about comedians, again, you might hear complaints or this or that, but everyone loved doing comedy, and
Right.
They loved. You could see them come alive when they get to go on stage.
Well, I sincerely hope that you take all these stories that you're putting on, Facebook and different social media, and you strap them together and you make a book out of it.
That would be great. I was hoping to get a
memories.
publisher, but I might have to self-publish.
Well, yeah, talk to me after the show. I got a guy that publishes my books that I think you'll like.
Great.
But in any case, yeah, wonderful stories about wonderful people in the industry.
Yeah,
And,
no, and I was very, I consider myself, I work hard. Like that's the way you get better at doing what you do. But at the same time, I just very blessed to have been honored to be in a lot of different scenarios. And I've always tried to be that way, to pay it forward to the comics I've met throughout my life by, getting them opportunities to work, by being honest with them about comedy. And, you can't please everyone. And I learned that was one of the hardest things to learn, is that, you're not here to please people. You're here to have as a comedian, you're telling your truth, and not everyone's going to love it. So you have to really stick with how you feel. And then also, if you see somebody who has that spark, you let them know, stick with it. It's not easy, but it's worth every moment.
Well, thank you so much for coming on again, Eddie. We so appreciate you coming out, especially at last notice. I booked this like a week ago, like less than a week ago.
Okay, thanks.
So I appreciate that. It's one of those things where you're coming off the tail end of a vacation and it's like, oh, geez, I got to book my show.
Yeah, and it's funny, the pictures on the ad for it, it looks like I'm completely tan, like I've been on a vacation, but I haven't yet.
Well, I got some AI art that I always send the AI art that I do for the last poster to the guest as kind of a gift after the show. So I've got some fun AI art that I'm going to send you
Oh, nice.
afterwards. Take
Great.
care. And again, we
Wait,
hope to have you back on again soon.
wait.
Here
I
comes
wanted
Renee.
to, because you had a Norman Lear. You had a picture.
Oh,
that
that's
we
right.
didn't.
I'm
I
sorry.
wanted to show that, and then Ray Charles, I think, right? So,
Well, I'll just quickly tell you, Norman Lear had gone to Emerson College like myself.
oh,
He had,
okay.
he had come to the school, and we had our comedy group. And this was me. I was hosting an event at Emerson that was honoring uh, Norman, and he had gone to Emerson like we had, and like I said, and I had told him about our comedy group, and he donated money to the school, and they formed the first comedy writing department in America. And I met him. I met up with him years later to thank him, and he said, "Well, so what did I do?" And I told him. He goes, "Yeah, it sounds like me." It was very funny, very very funny.
He's
He was,
101, isn't he?
yeah, I think
Wow,
he was
wow.
100 in that picture,
He
and
affected culture so much. I mean, like all of
Right.
Western culture was impacted by him. So I'm a
Ray
huge
Charles.
fan. And
yeah.
then we have wanted to show this picture.
Oh yeah, I got to open up for Ray Charles. There's a club in New York that was called Tramps, and it was their 20th anniversary. And he couldn't have been nicer. He loved my comedy. He was my fan of my stuff, and I couldn't believe it. He was just so incredible. And his he touched. If you look at the picture, he's grabbing my wrist, and I think that's how he tells things about people, because he feels your pulse, and that's how I can tell. The first show I did, it was there was 4 shows. The first show, it was raining, pissing down rain, and they had screwed up the times and the Village Voice, and people were standing in the rain for an extra hour. So when everyone came in, they weren't happy, and they go, "Ladies and gentlemen, you ready for Ray Charles?" And they cheered. They go, "But first, there's comedy." And I was supposed to do 45 minutes, and they were really, really, really. Oh, by the way, hey Chris, good to see you. They were really not in the mood, but they weren't really mean. They were really mean. And I told the audience, I said, "Look, if you shut up, I'm pretty good at this. Just stop it." I said, "No, it doesn't matter if I leave the stage, he's not going on for another 40 minutes. So don't. It's not going to make it better." And they still yelled and screamed, and he yelled at them when he came out, yelled at the crowd for the way they treated me, and I never forget that. He was so good.
Oh
Good.
man.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah, pretty nice.
You have led a charmed life, sir.
Yes,
There's
Lucky
no
Charms,
doubt. And,
magically delicious.
yeah, you need to write that book. You do. We need to
I
see
have
those
over
memoirs.
300 stories, so
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you again. Thank you all for coming back to It's Casual. We'll be back next week with Nick Milnes from Hong Kong,
cool.
performer and comedian. Yeah, he was been on the show once before, and he's got a lot to say too.
Cool. Well, it's always a pleasure with you guys, and appreciate it. And people want to contact me. I'm on Instagram at Eddie Comic, EDDIE COMIC, and feel free to say hello.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. All right. I think that's it.
All right. Be well, you guys.
I think that's it, except for stay tuned, because immediately after we wrap, Journeys is going live with MM Farwell, and it's the Suicide Prevention Month in September. So Cosmos Television is celebrating that. Not celebrating, but what's the word? What's the word? You 2 writers on screen here. We're acknowledging that. We're promoting
Yes.
suicide prevention. We're
Acknowledging
so
it. Yeah.
right. So the show's going to be about that. It's going to be really insightful and point people to different resources. So just don't change that channel. Just stick around. And thank you, Eddie. Love you, Eddie. I will be in New York to see you, Eddie. I will be in New York to see you.
I hope so.
All right. And thank you to all of our new viewers who came in. And I know that was Eddie Brill's star power bringing people in from all over the globe.
There
We
you go.
appreciate you all. All right. Hit subscribe, everybody.